The dust kicked up around her worn moccasins as Nadie Jimenez stumbled through the main street of Downieville, California, her vision blurring from 3 days without proper food or water. It was the summer of 1876, and the gold rush town had settled into a quieter existence, though prospectors and cowboys still drifted through with regularity. Nadie clutched her side where the makeshift bandage had soaked through with blood, the result of a run-in with bandits who had killed her father and brother on the trail 2 weeks prior. She had been traveling with them to find work, to escape the reservation where opportunities had dried up like the creek beds in August. Now she was alone, injured, and desperate. The street seemed to tilt sideways as she caught herself against a hitching post. Horses whinnied and stepped nervously away from her. She could feel the stares of townspeople burning into her back. An Apache woman alone in a California mining town was already unusual enough without the blood and the staggering. Her dark hair hung in tangled waves past her shoulders, and her dress, a mixture of traditional and settler clothing, was torn and filthy from her journey. "Please," she managed to whisper, though her throat was so dry the word barely formed. "I need a doctor." Most people turned away, uncomfortable or unwilling to involve themselves. Nadie felt her legs beginning to give out when a strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her before she could collapse into the dirt. "Easy there," a deep voice said, and she looked up into the face of a man who appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of aged whiskey. He wore a dusty brown hat, a simple shirt rolled up to his elbows, and the practical clothing of someone who worked with cattle for a living. "You are hurt pretty bad." "I can pay," Nadie said quickly, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were hollow. She had nothing. The bandits had taken everything of value her family had possessed. "I can work. I just need help." The cowboy studied her face for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he slipped an arm around her waist to support her weight. "The doctor is this way. Come on." Nadie tried to walk properly, to not lean too heavily on this stranger, but her body had reached its limit. Each step sent shooting pain through her side, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She was dimly aware of him speaking to her, asking her questions, but the words seemed to come from very far away. The next thing she knew with any clarity was the smell of carbolic acid and the sensation of lying on something soft. She opened her eyes to find herself on a narrow bed in what appeared to be a medical office. The doctor, an older man with spectacles and thinning gray hair, was cleaning the wound on her side while the cowboy stood nearby, his hat in his hands. "She has been lucky," the doctor said, addressing the cowboy rather than Nadie herself. "The knife wound is infected but not fatally so. With proper care and rest she should recover fully." "How much?" the cowboy asked. The doctor named a price that made Nadie's heart sink. It might as well have been $1 million for all her ability to pay it. She tried to push herself up on her elbows, panic flooding through her. "Wait," she said, her voice stronger now that the doctor had given her water. "I can pay. I will pay." Both men looked at her. The doctor's expression was skeptical, and the cowboy's face remained neutral, waiting. Nadie swallowed hard, shame burning in her chest even as she forced the words out. "I have nothing now, but I can work for you." She looked directly at the cowboy, since he seemed to be the one paying her medical bills. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes, tend animals. I am strong and I learn quickly." She paused, then added in barely more than a whisper, "If that is not enough, I can offer myself. I will be your wife, or your woman, whatever you require. Just please do not turn me away." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity. The doctor cleared his throat uncomfortably and busied himself with bandaging her wound. The cowboy's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Nadie to read them all, finally settling on something that looked almost like sadness. He took a step closer to the bed and spoke in a gentle but firm tone. "You do not owe me anything but your smile." Nadie blinked, certain she had misheard. "What? You heard me right." He settled his hat back on his head. "You are injured and alone. Any decent person would help. There is no debt between us. But the doctor, the medicine, where will I stay while I heal?" Nadie felt tears threatening, and she hated herself for the weakness. She had not cried when the bandits attacked, had not cried when she buried her father and brother in shallow graves on the trail, but this unexpected kindness threatened to undo her completely. "I have a small ranch about 3 miles outside town," the cowboy said. "It is not much, just me and a couple of hired hands, but there is a spare room in the main house. You can stay there while you recover. After that, if you want to move on, you are free to go. If you want to stay and work for wages, we can discuss that too. But you do not owe me yourself. You understand? You do not owe anyone that." The doctor finished his work and packed up his supplies, accepting payment from the cowboy without comment. After he left, Nadie and the stranger looked at each other in the dimming afternoon light filtering through the office windows. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "My name is Lucas Pierce. 5 years ago, my sister was traveling alone when she got into trouble. A family of farmers took her in, helped her with no expectation of payment. She made it home safe because of their kindness. I guess I figure kindness should keep moving forward in the world. There is too little of it as it is." "I am Nadie Jimenez," she replied softly, "and I will find a way to repay you whether you want me to or not." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the start of a smile. "How about we start with you getting some rest and healing up? We can argue about payment later." 2 days passed before Nadie was strong enough to make the journey to Lucas's ranch. He had arranged for her to stay in a room at the boarding house during that time, with meals brought to her and the doctor checking on her progress. Every instance of care and expense made Nadie more determined to find a way to repay this unexpected debt, even as Lucas continued to insist there was none. When he finally helped her up into the wagon for the ride to the ranch, Nadie was feeling considerably better, though still weak. The California summer surrounded them with dry heat and the smell of dust and sage. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the season. "It is beautiful here," Nadie observed as they left the town behind. "Different from where you are from?" Lucas asked, keeping the horses at an easy pace to avoid jostling her too much. "Very different. I grew up in Arizona territory in the mountains, more pine trees, different light, but this has its own beauty." She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. "You are wondering what I was doing so far from home. Only if you want to tell me." Nadie found herself wanting to tell him, which surprised her. She had kept her guard up for so long, trusting no one except her immediate family. But something about Lucas's steady presence made her feel safer than she had in months. "My father thought we would have better opportunities in California. The reservation where we lived, there was nothing there. No work, no future. He heard there were ranches hiring, farms that needed workers. My brother was only 17, and my father wanted him to have a chance at a real life." Her voice caught, and she paused to collect herself. "We were 3 days outside of Downieville when the bandits found us. They wanted our horses, our supplies. My father tried to reason with them, but they shot him anyway. My brother tried to fight, and they killed him too." "And you?" Lucas asked quietly. "I ran. One of them caught me, cut me, but I managed to get away in the dark. I hid for 2 days before I felt safe enough to come into town." the shame of surviving when her family had not burned in her chest. I buried them before I left. It was not proper, not the way they deserved, but it was all I could do. Lucas was silent for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. "I am sorry," he said finally. "That is a heavy weight to carry." "I do not know what I will do now," Nadie admitted. "I have no family left. The reservation holds nothing for me. I do not even know where to go." "You do not have to decide right now. Take time to heal, to think. The future has a way of making itself clearer when you are not bleeding and starving." Despite everything, Nadie felt a small laugh escape. "That is practical wisdom. I am a practical man." He glanced at her, and this time there was definitely a hint of warmth in his expression. "Though my sister would say I am too practical sometimes. She thinks I should have more fun." "And do you have fun?" "I work mostly. The ranch keeps me busy, but I like the work, so maybe that is its own kind of fun." The ranch, when it came into view, was modest but well-maintained. A simple wooden house with a covered porch stood beside a barn and several outbuildings. Corrals held a dozen horses, and Nadie could see cattle grazing in the distance. Two men were working near the barn, and they looked up with curiosity as the wagon approached. Lucas pulled the horses to a stop and called out, "James, Samuel, come meet our guest." The two ranch hands approached, both young men who looked to be in their early 20s. James was tall and lanky with red hair, while Samuel was shorter and stockier with dark hair and a friendly smile. "This is Miss Nadie Jimenez," Lucas said as he climbed down from the wagon. "She will be staying with us while she recovers from an injury. I expect you both to be respectful and helpful." "Yes, sir," they said in near unison, tipping their hats to Nadie. Lucas came around to help Nadie down from the wagon, supporting her as her feet touched the ground. She was stronger than she had been, but the journey had tired her more than she wanted to admit. "The spare room is already prepared," Lucas said, guiding her toward the house. "It is not fancy, but it is clean and the bed is comfortable." Inside, the house was simple but surprisingly tidy for a bachelor establishment. The main room held a table, chairs, and a simple kitchen area. A door led to what Nadie assumed was Lucas's bedroom, and another opened to reveal a smaller room with a single bed, a washstand, and a small dresser. "I will leave you to rest," Lucas said. "There is water in the pitcher, and I will bring you some food in a bit. If you need anything, just call out." After he left, closing the door behind him, Nadie sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked around the small room. It was more than she had expected, more than she felt she deserved. The overwhelming urge to prove herself useful, to earn her place here, thrummed through her veins like a second heartbeat. The first week at the ranch passed in a blur of rest and healing. Nadie chafed at the forced inactivity, but every time she tried to help with tasks around the house, Lucas would gently but firmly direct her back to resting. The doctor came once to check her progress and pronounced himself satisfied with how the wound was healing. "You are lucky that Cowboy found you when he did," the doctor said as he rewrapped her bandage. "Another day and the infection might have been too far gone to treat." After the doctor left, Nadie sat on the porch, enjoying the evening breeze. Lucas was working with one of the horses in the corral, his movements patient and sure as he led the animal through its paces. She watched him work, noting the care he took, the way he spoke softly to the horse, rewarding every small success. When he finished and turned the horse loose, he saw her watching and walked over to the porch. "You are looking better," he observed, settling himself on the steps a respectful distance away. "I feel much better, strong enough to start helping around here." "The doctor said you need another week of taking it easy." "The doctor is overcautious. I am used to working. Sitting idle makes me feel useless." Lucas pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. You are not useless. You are healing. There is a difference. You have been kind to me, too kind. Please let me help. I can cook at least. You and your men have been making do with basic meals. I could prepare proper food. He studied her face, seeming to consider. If I let you cook, will you promise not to overdo it? The minute you feel tired or your side hurts, you stop. Deal. Deal, Nadie agreed, relief flooding through her. The next morning she rose early and made her way to the kitchen. The supplies were basic but adequate, and she set about making breakfast with a sense of purpose she had been missing. She prepared eggs, biscuits, and fried potatoes, using the skills her mother had taught her years ago. When Lucas, James, and Samuel came in from the early morning chores, they stopped short at the sight of the table laden with food. "Miss Jimenez," James said, his eyes wide, "you did not have to do all this." "I wanted to," Nadie replied, feeling oddly pleased by their reactions. "Please sit and eat before it gets cold." The meal was eaten with enthusiasm and multiple compliments. Even Lucas, who had been skeptical about her helping so soon, had to admit the food was excellent. "You are not exaggerating about your cooking skills," he said, accepting a second biscuit. "My mother was an excellent cook. She made sure I learned properly." Nadie felt the familiar pang of loss but pushed through it. She used to say that good food was a way of showing love and respect. "She taught you well," Samuel said with his mouth half full, earning a look from Lucas that made him swallow quickly and add, "Sorry, that was rude." Nadie found herself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time since the attack. There was something comfortable about this small household, something that felt almost like family. As the days turned into weeks, Nadie settled into a routine at the ranch. She cooked meals, mended clothes, and kept the house tidy. As her strength returned, she began helping with other tasks, gathering eggs from the chickens, tending the small vegetable garden, and even helping with some of the lighter ranch work. Lucas watched over her progress with a careful eye, ready to intervene if she pushed herself too hard. But he seemed pleased with how naturally she fit into the rhythm of ranch life. The relationship between them was polite, friendly, but there was something else there too, something neither of them seemed ready to name. It was James who finally pointed it out. One evening when Nadie was gathering laundry from the line, and Lucas was supposed to be fixing a fence, but kept finding reasons to be where he could see the house. "Boss, are you going to actually tell her you are interested, or are you just going to keep mooning around like a lovesick calf?" James asked, too quietly for Nadie to hear. Lucas shot him a sharp look. "I am not mooning around. Sure, and I am the governor of California. Come on, boss." Even Samuel noticed, and he is about as observant as a fence post. She has been through a terrible trauma. She is here because she needed help, not because she wants some cowboy making unwanted advances. Have you considered that maybe the advances would not be unwanted? Lucas turned to face his ranch hand fully. "She offered herself as payment when she was desperate and injured. I am not going to take advantage of that situation by pursuing her now." James sighed and shook his head. "That is noble and all, but you are assuming she does not have her own feelings on the matter. Maybe you should talk to her, let her make her own choices." The conversation haunted Lucas for the rest of the day. The truth was, he had developed feelings for Nadie, deeper feelings than he had expected. He admired her strength, her determination to contribute despite everything she had been through. He loved her laugh, which came more frequently now, and the way she hummed while she cooked. He appreciated her intelligence and the thoughtful way she approached problems. But he kept coming back to that first day in the doctor's office, when she had offered herself because she felt she had no other choice. He never wanted her to feel obligated to him in any way. If there was going to be anything between them, It had to be because she wanted it, not because she felt she owed him. Nadie, for her part, was wrestling with her own confused feelings. She found herself thinking about Lucas at odd moments, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his hands when he worked with the animals, the sound of his voice when he sang softly to himself while working. She caught herself looking for him throughout the day, feeling more content when he was nearby, but she did not know how to interpret these feelings. Was she simply grateful for his kindness? Was she confusing safety and security with something deeper? And even if her feelings were genuine, would he welcome them? Or would he see them as another form of payment, another attempt to settle a debt he insisted did not exist? The situation came to a head on a warm evening in late July. Nadie had prepared dinner, and the men had eaten and retired to the bunkhouse, leaving Lucas and Nadie alone in the house. She was washing dishes when Lucas came to help, taking up a towel to dry. They worked in companionable silence for a while before Nadie spoke. "I have been thinking about my plans." Lucas's hand stilled on the plate he was drying. "Oh, I am well now, fully healed. I cannot continue to impose on your hospitality. You are not imposing. You earn your keep 10 times over with the work you do. Still, I should think about the future. I was considering looking for work in town, maybe as a cook or a housemaid. With the wages you have been paying me, I have enough for a room for a few weeks while I look." Lucas set down the plate and towel with deliberate care. "Is that what you want, to move to town?" Nadie kept her eyes on the soapy water. "I want to be independent. I want to make my own way." "That is not what I asked." She finally looked up at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "What are you asking then?" "I am asking if you want to leave, Nadie. Not if you think you should, not what makes practical sense, but what you actually want." The directness of the question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to give a diplomatic answer, then stopped. He deserved honesty. "I do not want to leave," she admitted. "I feel at home here in a way I have not felt anywhere else in a long time, but I do not want to overstay my welcome, and I do not want you to feel obligated to keep me here out of pity or charity." "Pity," Lucas repeated, something like frustration entering his tone. "You think I have let you stay out of pity? What else would it be? You found me bleeding in the street. You paid for my care out of the goodness of your heart. I am grateful, truly, but I do not want to be an object of charity." Lucas took a step closer, his eyes searching her face. "Nadie, you stopped being charity about 2 days after you got here. You have become part of this place, part of what makes it work. More than that, you have become important to me, not as someone I am helping, but as someone I care about." Nadie's heart was beating very fast now. "Lucas, I do not understand what you are saying." "I am saying that I have feelings for you, real feelings. I have been trying not to let them show because I did not want you to feel pressured or obligated. But if you are thinking about leaving because you believe you are not wanted here, then I need you to know the truth. I want you to stay, not as an employee and not as someone paying off a debt, but because I cannot imagine this place without you anymore." The words hung in the air between them. Nadie felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that what she said next would change everything. "I have feelings for you too," she said quietly. "I have been afraid to acknowledge them, afraid that I was confusing gratitude with something deeper. But it is not gratitude, Lucas. When I see you, my heart feels lighter. When you smile, I feel warm inside. When I think about leaving, it hurts in a way that has nothing to do with my injury." Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His touch was warm and gentle, and Nadie felt a spark travel up her arm at the contact. "So do not leave," he said. "Stay here, stay with me, not because you owe me anything, but because you want to." "I want to," Nadie whispered. I want to very much." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face, and Nadie felt herself smiling back. There was no dramatic kiss, no sudden embrace. Instead, they stood there in the kitchen with soapy dishwater cooling in the basin, holding hands and smiling at each other like the rest of the world had fallen away. The next few weeks were a time of discovery and growing closeness. Lucas courted Nadie properly, despite the fact that she lived under his roof. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, taught her to ride the gentler horses, and spent evenings on the porch talking with her about everything and nothing. Nadie found herself opening up in ways she never had before, telling Lucas about her childhood, her dreams, her fears. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and sharing his own stories in return. She learned that he had come to California from Texas 5 years ago, saving every penny to buy this small ranch. His parents had died when he was young, and he and his sister had been raised by an aunt who taught them the value of hard work and kindness. "My sister Emily writes to me every month," Lucas told Nadie one evening as they watched the sun set over the hills. "She is married now, living in Oregon with her husband and 2 children. She keeps asking when I am going to settle down and give her nieces and nephews." "And what do you tell her?" Nadie asked, very aware of how close Lucas was sitting to her on the porch steps. "Up until recently, I told her I was too busy running the ranch, but I think my next letter might have different news." Nadie felt her cheeks warm. "Oh, what news is that?" Lucas turned to look at her directly, his expression serious. "Nadie, I know we have not been courting long, but I am not a man who wastes time when he knows what he wants. I want a future with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are here. I want to build something together, a real home, a real family." "Lucas, I want that too, but what?" Nadie struggled to find the words. "There are people in town who do not approve of someone like you being with someone like me. I have seen the looks, heard the whispers when we go to town together. I do not want to make your life harder." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Anyone who has a problem with us can answer to me. Nadie, I do not care what small-minded people think. I care about you. The rest is just noise." "It is not always just noise. It can be dangerous. Then we will be careful and we will be strong, together." He took both her hands in his. "I am not saying the world is fair or easy. I know it is not, especially for you. But I am saying that I want to face whatever comes with you by my side. If you will have me." Nadie looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and determination. This man who had asked nothing of her but her smile was offering her everything. A home, a future, a love freely given with no strings attached. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, I will have you." This time there was a kiss, sweet and gentle and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, and Nadie felt like she could float away on the happiness bubbling up inside her. They were married in September, on a crisp autumn day when the leaves were just beginning to turn. The ceremony was small, held at the ranch with only a few friends in attendance. James and Samuel served as witnesses, along with a few neighboring ranchers who had become friends with Lucas over the years. The pastor from Downieville performed the ceremony, and if he had any reservations about the mixed marriage, he kept them to himself. Nadie wore a simple dress that she had made herself, white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She wove wildflowers into her dark hair, and when Lucas saw her walking toward him across the yard, his eyes shone with unmistakable love. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but when Lucas slipped the simple gold band onto Nadie's finger, he added, "You have never owed me anything but your smile, and now I get to see it every day for the rest of my life." Nadie felt tears slip down her cheeks as she replied, You gave me back my life when I had nothing. Now I give you my heart, freely and completely." The celebration that followed was joyful. Samuel played fiddle while James called a few dances. They ate a feast that Nadie and the neighboring ranchers' wives had prepared together, and toasted the new couple with homemade wine. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Lucas and Nadie stood together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Happy, Mrs. Pierce?" Lucas asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Nadie replied honestly. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling safe and loved and home. The first year of marriage brought its share of challenges and adjustments. There were practical matters to work out, like how to manage the ranch finances together and how to handle the increased workload as they gradually expanded the operation. There were also the external challenges, the occasional nasty comment in town, or the uncomfortable silences when they entered a shop together. But for every challenge, there were a dozen small joys. Nadie loved waking up next to Lucas, loved the way he kissed her forehead before heading out to work each morning. She loved cooking for him and seeing his appreciation, loved the evenings when they would sit together and plan for the future. Lucas, for his part, was constantly amazed by Nadie's strength and resilience, her ability to face difficulty with grace and determination. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Nadie had a good head for numbers and began keeping the accounts, discovering ways to save money and increase profits. She also started a small enterprise of her own, making traditional Apache crafts and remedies that she sold in town and to travelers passing through. Some people refused to buy from her, but others appreciated the quality of her work, and slowly she built up a small but steady customer base. It was in the spring of 1878, almost 2 years after Lucas had found Nadie bleeding in the street, that she discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had waited to be sure before telling Lucas. She chose a quiet evening to share the news when they were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the first stars appear. "Lucas, I have something to tell you," she began, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He turned to her immediately, his expression concerned. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine, actually." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Lucas just stared at her, processing the information. Then a smile broke across his face, so wide and joyful that it made Nadie laugh. "A baby," he repeated, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby. Yes. The doctor confirmed it yesterday when I was in town." Lucas pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful not to squeeze too hard. "Nadie, this is wonderful. This is the best news. Are you happy? How are you feeling?" "I am happy and I feel good. A little tired, but the doctor says that is normal." She pulled back to look at him. "Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am overjoyed. I am terrified. I am 100 different things all at once." He kissed her gently. "We are going to be parents." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Nadie found the summer heat more oppressive than usual. Lucas fussed over her constantly, trying to make sure she did not overwork herself. James and Samuel pitched in more around the house, and even hired an additional hand to help with the heavier ranch work. In October, Nadie went into labor on a cool, clear evening. The doctor was summoned from town, and Lucas paced the house like a caged animal while Nadie labored in their bedroom. It was a long night, but when dawn broke, the cry of a newborn baby filled the house. Lucas was allowed in to find Nadie exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "It is a boy," she said softly. "A healthy boy." Lucas approached carefully, as if the moment was too precious to disturb. He looked down at his son, at the tiny face and the impossibly small fingers, and felt his eyes fill with tears. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered. "You are both perfect." They named him Daniel Lucas Pierce, and he became the center of their world. Lucas had never known he could love something so fiercely, so completely. He would sit for hours just watching his son sleep, marveling at the miracle of him. Nadie blossomed as a mother, patient and loving, singing traditional Apache lullabies to soothe Daniel when he fussed. James and Samuel were immediately smitten with the baby, competing to see who could make him smile first. The ranch became a livelier place, filled with the sounds of a growing family. When Daniel was 6 months old, Lucas received a letter from his sister Emily, saying she was planning to visit with her family that summer. Lucas was both excited and nervous about the visit. He and Emily had always been close, but he wondered how she would react to his wife and son. Emily arrived in July with her husband Robert and their 2 daughters, ages 4 and 6. From the moment Emily laid eyes on Nadie, she swept her into a warm hug. "I am so glad to finally meet you," Emily said, her smile genuine. "Lucas's letters have been full of you and little Daniel. I have been desperate to meet you both." The 2 families spent a wonderful week together. Emily and Nadie became fast friends, bonding over their experiences as mothers and their shared love of Lucas. The children played together, and Robert and Lucas spent long hours discussing ranching and business. On Emily's last evening at the ranch, she and Nadie sat on the porch while the men played with the children in the yard. "I want to thank you," Emily said, watching her brother laugh as he tossed Daniel gently in the air. "Thank me? For what?" Nadie asked, confused. "For making my brother so happy. I have never seen him like this, so content and full of joy. You and Daniel, you have given him something I did not think he would ever find." Nadie felt warmth spread through her chest. "He has given me everything. When I met him, I had lost my family and nearly lost my life. He saved me in every way a person can be saved." Emily shook her head. "From what he has told me, you saved each other. That is what love is supposed to do, I think. Make both people better, stronger, more complete." The visit ended with promises to write regularly and plans for future visits. As Emily's wagon disappeared down the road, Lucas put his arm around Nadie's shoulders. "That went well," he said with satisfaction. "Your sister is wonderful. I can see where you get your kindness from. We learned from the best. Our Aunt Margaret, she always said that family is not just about blood. It is about who you choose to love and who chooses to love you back." Nadie leaned into him, holding Daniel close. "Then I am very lucky to have chosen you and to have been chosen in return." The years that followed brought continued growth and happiness. The ranch expanded, becoming one of the more successful operations in the area. Daniel grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair. When he was 3, Nadie became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Marie Pierce. Rose was a quieter baby than Daniel had been, with serious dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She was content to sit and watch the world, unlike her brother who was always in motion. Lucas doted on his daughter, calling her his little flower, and Nadie loved watching her stoic cowboy husband become putty in the hands of their tiny daughter. As the children grew, Nadie made sure they learned about both sides of their heritage. She taught them Apache words and songs, told them stories of her people and their traditions. Lucas supported this completely, understanding how important it was for their children to know and honor all of who they were. There were still difficult moments. Daniel came home from town one day when he was 7, confused and hurt because another boy had called him a half-breed and said he did not belong anywhere. Nadie and Lucas sat him down together to address it. Some people, Lucas said carefully, are afraid of things they do not understand. They say hurtful things because they are ignorant or scared. But what that boy said is wrong, Nadie added firmly. You are not half of anything. You are fully yourself, fully our son, fully a person deserving of respect and love. You belong right here with us, and you belong in this world just as much as anyone else. What if other kids say mean things too? Daniel asked, his voice small. Then you remember what we are telling you now, Lucas said. You remember that you are loved, that you are strong, and that you come from two proud heritages. You hold your head high and you do not let anyone make you feel less than what you are. Daniel seemed to take comfort in this, and as he grew older, he developed a quiet confidence that served him well. Rose, when she was old enough to understand such things, had her father's practical nature and faced prejudice with a calm directness that often disarmed those who tried to hurt her. By the time Daniel was 12 and Rose was 9, the ranch had grown significantly. Lucas and Nadie employed several full-time hands and had built a reputation for quality horses and cattle. They had also become respected members of the community, at least among those whose opinions mattered to them. James had married a woman from town and built a small house on the edge of the ranch property. Samuel had moved on to start his own operation in Oregon, but he wrote regularly and visited when he could. The ranch had become more than just a business. It was a community, a place where people were valued and families could thrive. One evening in the fall of 1889, Lucas and Nadie sat on the porch as they had countless times before. The children were inside doing their schoolwork, and the ranch was quiet in the fading light. You ever think about that day in Downieville? Lucas asked, his hand finding Nadie's as naturally as breathing. Which day? The day we met, or the day we married, or one of the hundreds of days in between? The very first day, when you stumbled into town and I found you. Nadie was quiet for a moment, remembering. I think about it often. I was so desperate, so certain that I had nothing left to offer the world except my body and my labor. I could not imagine that anyone would help me without expecting something in return. And now I know that kindness exists. Real kindness, the kind that expects nothing in return. You taught me that, Lucas. You taught me that I had value beyond what I could do or give. You taught me that I deserved love. Lucas brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. You always deserved love. I am just glad I was the one lucky enough to give it to you. I was the lucky one, Nadie insisted. I had lost everything and then I found you, found this life, this family. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if someone else had found me that day or if no one had helped at all. But someone did help. I did. And you stayed, and we built this life together. He gestured to the ranch, the house, the warm light spilling from the windows where their children worked. This is real, Nadie. This is ours. We earned it through hard work and love and determination. When I offered myself to you that day, I thought I was offering all I had, but I did not understand yet that I had so much more to give. My heart, my dreams, my future. And you did not take them from me. You gave me the space to offer them freely when I was ready. You owe me nothing but your smile, Lucas said softly, repeating the words he had spoken so long ago. That was true then, and it is true now. Everything else, everything we have become, that has been a gift freely given on both sides. Nadie turned to look at him, this man who had changed her life in every possible way. His face showed the years that had passed, lines around his eyes and gray threading through his dark hair, but he was still the same man who had caught her when she fell, who had seen her value when she had forgotten it herself. I love you, she said simply. For 13 years I have loved you more with each passing day. I did not think that was possible, to keep loving someone more and more, but you have proven me wrong." "I love you too," Lucas replied, pulling her close. "You are my best decision, my greatest adventure, my home." They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, comfortable in the silence that only comes from years of knowing someone completely. Inside, they could hear Daniel helping Rose with her arithmetic, his patient voice explaining the problems. It was an ordinary moment, unremarkable in many ways, but it was also everything. It was the life they had built together, the family they had created, the love they had nurtured. 2 years later, Nadie discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise given that Rose was already 11. Lucas was delighted, though concerned about Nadie's health, as she was now in her late 30s. But the pregnancy went smoothly, and in the spring of 1892 they welcomed another son, Thomas James Pierce, named after James, who had been such a loyal friend over the years. Daniel, now nearly 15, was protective of his baby brother, while Rose was enchanted with the new addition to the family. The house once again filled with the sounds of a baby, and Lucas joked that they were starting all over again. "At least this time we know what we are doing," Nadie said, rocking Thomas as he nursed. "Do we, though?" Lucas asked with a grin. "I am not sure anyone ever really knows what they are doing with children. Fair point, but we know more than we did with Daniel." "That is true. With Daniel, I was terrified I would break him. He was so tiny and fragile. And now look at him, almost as tall as you and growing like a weed." Lucas looked at his eldest son, who was out in the corral working with one of the young horses. "He is a good young man." "You have done well with him, Nadie." "We have done well with him," she corrected. "He is ours together." As Thomas grew, it became clear that he had inherited his mother's quiet intensity and his father's steady nature. He was content to sit and observe, learning by watching before trying things himself. Rose doted on him, and Daniel took his role as oldest brother seriously, teaching Thomas to ride and rope as he grew old enough. The ranch continued to prosper. Daniel showed a natural aptitude for working with horses and began to take on more responsibility in that area. Rose surprised everyone by showing a talent for the business side of things, keeping track of inventory and sales with a precision that impressed even her mother. In 1895, when Daniel was 18, he announced that he wanted to start breeding horses specifically, focusing on creating strong, intelligent animals suitable for ranch work and long-distance riding. Lucas and Nadie supported his ambition, helping him set up his own operation on a portion of the ranch land. Rose, at 15, declared her intention to go to school in Sacramento, wanting to learn bookkeeping and business management properly. It was a difficult decision for Nadie and Lucas, as Sacramento was far away and they worried about their daughter being alone in a city. But they also recognized her intelligence and ambition, and they did not want to hold her back. "The world is changing," Nadie said to Lucas as they discussed Rose's plans. "She will face challenges as a woman and as someone with mixed heritage, but she is strong and she is smart. We have to let her try." "I know you are right," Lucas sighed, "but she is still my little girl." The thought of her being so far away, facing people who might not treat her well, it makes me want to keep her here where I can protect her. We cannot protect our children from the world forever. We can only give them the tools to face it themselves, and we have done that. All 3 of our children know who they are, know their worth. That will carry them through. So Rose went to Sacramento, returning home for visits that were joyous reunions. She wrote regularly, describing her classes and her experiences in the city. Some things were difficult, she reported, but she was managing, making friends and learning at a rapid pace. Daniel's horse breeding operation began to show promise. He had an eye for good bloodlines and the patience to train properly. By the time he was 21, he had earned a reputation for producing quality animals, and buyers came from across California to purchase from him. Thomas, at 9 years old, was still finding his path. He loved the ranch but was also fascinated by books and learning, spending hours reading anything he could get his hands on. Nadie encouraged this, understanding the value of education, while Lucas made sure the boy also learned practical skills. It was in the winter of 1898 that Lucas fell ill with pneumonia. It came on suddenly, going from a mild cough to a serious illness in a matter of days. Nadie nursed him frantically, using every remedy she knew, both traditional Apache medicines and the treatments the doctor prescribed. Daniel and Thomas took over running the ranch while Rose rushed home from Sacramento to help her mother. For 2 weeks, Lucas's life hung in the balance. Nadie barely left his side, sleeping in a chair next to their bed, forcing him to drink broth and tea even when he was too weak to protest. She prayed to both the Christian God and the Apache spirits, bargaining for his life, promising anything if he would just survive. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Lucas began to improve. The fever broke, his breathing eased and color returned to his face. By the end of the 3rd week, he was sitting up in bed, weak but clearly on the mend. "You are not allowed to do that again," Nadie told him, tears streaming down her face as she held his hand. "You are not allowed to leave me. We have a deal, remember. We face whatever comes together." "I am not going anywhere," Lucas promised, his voice hoarse. "It would take more than pneumonia to keep me from you." The illness had frightened them all, a stark reminder that nothing in life was guaranteed, but it also reinforced the strength of their family bonds. The children had pulled together seamlessly to keep the ranch running. Rose had set aside her studies without complaint to be there for her mother. And Nadie had shown a fierce determination that reminded everyone why she had survived when others might have given up. As Lucas recovered his strength over the following months, he and Nadie began to talk seriously about the future. They were both in their mid-40s now, and while the ranch was successful, it required constant work that was becoming more difficult as they aged. "I am thinking we should start transitioning more responsibility to Daniel," Lucas said one evening. "He has proven himself capable, and the ranch will be his someday anyway. Better to do it gradually while I am still here to guide him than to dump everything on him all at once." "That makes sense," Nadie agreed. "And when Rose finishes her studies, she could manage the business aspects. Between the two of them, they could run the operation smoothly." "What about us? What would we do with ourselves?" Nadie smiled. "We could slow down a bit. Enjoy our grandchildren when they come. Travel, maybe. You always said you wanted to visit Oregon and see how Samuel is doing." "I like the sound of that. Not retiring completely, but not working ourselves into an early grave either." They began implementing their plan, gradually shifting more decision-making authority to Daniel while preparing Rose to take over the financial management. Thomas, now 11, was still too young for major responsibility, but they made sure he was learning all aspects of the ranch operation so he could choose his own path when the time came. In 1900, Daniel married a young woman named Sarah, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. The wedding was a grand affair, bringing together families from across the region. Nadie and Lucas stood together watching their son exchange vows, remembering their own simple ceremony 24 years earlier. "He looks happy," Lucas observed. "He looks terrified," Nadie corrected with a smile. "But yes, happy too. Sarah is a good match for him, like you were for me." "Like we were for each other," Nadie amended, taking his hand. The new century brought changes to Downieville and the surrounding area. The railroad had expanded, making travel and commerce easier. New technologies were appearing, things Lucas and Nadie had never imagined when they first met. But the core of their life remained the same: family, hard work, and love. Rose returned from Sacramento in 1901 with her degree and immediately set about modernizing the ranch's business practices. She implemented new record-keeping systems, established better relationships with buyers, and found ways to increase profits while maintaining quality. Her contributions proved invaluable, and Lucas often told her that she had a better head for business than he ever had. Thomas, as he entered his teenage years, continued to surprise them. He was as comfortable with a book as with a rope, equally interested in literature and cattle breeding. He talked about perhaps becoming a veterinarian, a new profession that was gaining respect, and his parents encouraged this dream. In 1903, Daniel and Sarah welcomed their first child, a daughter named Emma. Nadie held her first grandchild with tears in her eyes, marveling at the tiny miracle and remembering when Daniel had been this small. Lucas was equally smitten, and the baby brought new energy and joy to the ranch. "We have come a long way from that day in Downieville," Lucas said, watching Nadie coo at baby Emma. "Further than I ever dared to hope," Nadie agreed. "When I stumbled into that town, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything, but I had not lost anything yet. I was about to find everything." Rose married in 1905 to a businessman from Sacramento named William, who treated her with respect and clear adoration. Nadie had worried about Rose marrying someone from the city, someone who might not understand or accept her heritage, but William proved those fears unfounded. He was genuinely interested in learning about Apache culture and traditions, and he made sure Rose never had to hide any part of herself. Thomas, at 17, had indeed decided to pursue veterinary medicine. He left for school in San Francisco in 1906, just months before the great earthquake struck. The family received a frantic telegram from him assuring them he was safe, though the city was devastated. He finished his studies and returned to the area in 1909, setting up a practice that served ranchers throughout the region. By 1910, Lucas and Nadie had truly retired from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Daniel ran it with Sarah's help, while Rose and William had moved back to the area, and Rose served as the ranch's business manager. Thomas lived nearby with his practice, often stopping by for dinner with his parents. Lucas was now in his mid-50s, his hair almost completely gray, his face deeply lined from years in the sun. But his eyes were still bright when he looked at Nadie, still full of the love that had sustained them for over 3 decades. Nadie's hair had gone gray as well, though she was still strong and active, still beautiful to Lucas. They spent their days doing lighter work around the house, tending a large garden and spoiling their growing number of grandchildren. Emma now had 3 younger siblings, and Rose had given them 2 grandsons. The ranch house that had once seemed so spacious was now filled with the sounds of family gatherings, children's laughter, and the comfortable conversation of multiple generations. One warm summer evening in 1911, the entire family gathered for a barbecue celebrating Lucas and Nadie's 35th wedding anniversary. The yard was full of people, food, music, and joy. Daniel and Sarah's children were playing with Rose and William's boys while Thomas, still unmarried but content, played his guitar. As the sun began to set, Daniel called for everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To my parents, who have shown all of us what love and commitment truly mean. Thank you for building this family, this home, this life that we all get to share. Thank you for being examples of strength and kindness and determination." Everyone raised their glasses, echoing the sentiment. Then Rose spoke up. "I want to add something. Mother, Father, you taught us that heritage is something to be proud of, that being different is not a weakness but a strength. You never let the world make you smaller, and you taught us to stand tall too. That is a gift we will pass on to our children." Nadie felt tears on her cheeks, good tears, happy tears. Lucas put his arm around her shoulders and kissed her temple. "We are blessed," he whispered. "So blessed," she agreed. Later, after the guests had left and the children and grandchildren had gone to their own homes, Lucas and Nadie sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge. It was the same porch where they had courted, where they had discussed their dreams, where they had comforted worried children and celebrated happy news. It was worn and weathered now, like them, but still solid, still home. "You remember what I said to you that first day?" Lucas asked. "You said I owed you nothing but my smile, and have you paid that debt?" Nadie laughed softly. "I have smiled every day for 35 years. If that is a debt, it is the easiest one I have ever paid." "It was never really a debt," Lucas said. "It was a promise. A promise that you would find reasons to smile again, that life would give you joy again. I think we have kept that promise." "We have kept many promises," Nadie said. She stood up and held out her hand to him. "Come, let us go inside. Tomorrow we can sit on this porch again and count our blessings again. But tonight, I want to lie beside my husband and feel grateful for every moment we have been given." Lucas took her hand and let her lead him inside, into the home they had built together, the life they had created from nothing but kindness and hope and love. Behind them, the stars continued their ancient dance across the California sky, bearing witness to a love that had endured and thrived against all odds. The years continued to pass gently. In 1915, Thomas finally married to a teacher named Margaret who shared his love of learning and animals. They built a house in Downieville itself, close enough to visit often but with their own space. Their wedding was another joyous gathering, and Nadie marveled at how her youngest child, once a surprise baby late in her life, was now a man building his own family. More grandchildren arrived, and then great-grandchildren. The ranch that Lucas and Nadie had built became a legacy spanning generations. Daniel's son, named Lucas after his grandfather, showed the same gentle strength that had characterized his namesake. Rose's boys grew into fine young men who honored both sides of their heritage proudly. By 1920, Lucas and Nadie were in their late 60s and early 70s, respectively. Their children insisted they take things easy, that they had earned their rest. But neither of them could fully stop working. Lucas still puttered around the barn, checking on the horses, offering advice when asked. Nadie still tended her garden, still cooked for family gatherings, still made her traditional crafts. They took the trip to Oregon they had discussed years ago, visiting Samuel, who was now running a successful ranch of his own. The reunion was emotional and happy, full of reminiscing and laughter. Samuel had never married, claiming that ranch life kept him too busy, but he seemed content and prosperous. "You did well for yourself," Lucas told his old friend as they surveyed Samuel's land. "I learned from the best," Samuel replied. "You taught me that a ranch is more than just business. It is family, community, a way of life." I tried to remember that. The journey back to California was leisurely, giving Lucas and Nadie time to enjoy the scenery and each other's company. They stayed in small towns along the way, meeting new people and collecting stories. It was during this trip that Nadie finally felt like she could fully let go of the pain from her past. Her father and brother's deaths would always be a part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She had built something beautiful from that tragedy, had created a life full of love and purpose. "I have been thinking," she said to Lucas as they traveled through the mountains of Northern California, about how many times our lives could have gone differently. If you had not been in Downieville that day, if you had ignored me like everyone else did, if I had been too proud to accept help. But none of those things happened, Lucas pointed out. We cannot live in the world of what-ifs. We can only live in the world we have. I know. And I am grateful for the world we have, for every choice that brought us here. I just want to make sure you know how much it all meant. How much you mean to me. Lucas reached across the wagon seat and took her hand. I know, Nadie. I have always known. Just as I hope you know how much you mean to me. You are my heart. You have been since that day in Downieville, and you will be until my last breath. They returned home to find that Daniel and Sarah were expecting their 5th child, a late addition to their family. Rose's youngest son was getting married. Thomas and Margaret were talking about moving to a larger practice in Sacramento. Life continued its forward march, ever changing, ever growing. In the fall of 1922, Lucas began to slow down more noticeably. He tired more easily and sometimes seemed confused about small things. Nadie watched with concern as the man who had been her rock for so many years began to show the true effects of age. The doctor said it was simply the natural progression of time, that Lucas's body was wearing out after a long, hard life. Lucas himself seemed at peace with it. I've had more than most men get, he told Nadie when she fussed over him. I have lived to see my children grown and successful. I have held my grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. I have spent almost 50 years with the love of my life. That is more blessing than any man deserves. You deserve every blessing, Nadie said fiercely. You are the best man I have ever known. On a clear October morning in 1923, Lucas died peacefully in his sleep with Nadie beside him. He was 72 years old and had lived every one of those years with integrity and kindness. The funeral drew people from all over the region, testament to the respect he had earned over his lifetime. Nadie grieved deeply, but not bitterly. She had known this day would come eventually, had tried to prepare herself for it, even though such preparation is impossible. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love and support, and gradually the sharp edge of grief dulled into a bittersweet ache. She continued living in the ranch house, refusing all suggestions that she move in with one of her children. This was her home, the place she had built with Lucas, and she wanted to stay there. Daniel and his family lived close enough to check on her daily, and someone was always dropping by with food or company. Nadie took comfort in her routines, in tending her garden and making her crafts. She began writing down stories from her life, wanting to preserve them for her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She wrote about growing up in Arizona, about her parents and brother, about the attack that had nearly killed her. And she wrote extensively about Lucas, about his kindness and strength, about the life they had built together. One of her great-granddaughters, a serious girl of 12 named Lily, loved to visit and listen to Nadie's stories. She would sit at her great-grandmother's feet, eyes wide, as Nadie told her about the old days. "Great-grandma," Lily asked one day, "when you offered to marry Grandpa Lucas that first day, were you scared?" "Terrified," Nadie admitted. "I was offering the only thing I thought I had left. But I was more scared of dying alone in that street. But he said you did not owe him anything but your smile. That is so romantic." Nadie smiled at the girl's dreamy expression. "It was more than romantic. It was transformative. He showed me that I had value beyond what I could give or do. He showed me that I was worthy of love and respect just for being myself. That changed everything for me. I hope I find someone like that someday," Lily said wistfully. "I hope you do too, sweetheart. But remember, you have to know your own worth first. Do not wait for someone else to show it to you. Be strong in yourself, and then find someone who adds to that strength rather than taking from it. These conversations became precious to Nadie, these opportunities to pass on wisdom and stories. She took her role as matriarch seriously, understanding that she was now the keeper of family history, the bridge between the past and the future. On a warm spring day in 1926, exactly 50 years after Lucas had found her in the streets of Downieville, Nadie gathered her entire family at the ranch for a celebration. 3 generations filled the house and yard, from Daniel, now in his late 40s, down to the newest great-great-grandchild, born just weeks earlier. When everyone had gathered, Nadie stood on the porch steps to address them all. She was 83 years old now, her back bent and her hair completely white, but her eyes were still sharp and her voice was still strong. 50 years ago today, she began, I stumbled into Downieville more dead than alive. I had lost my family, my health, my hope. I had nothing except desperation and a fierce will to survive. And then a cowboy I had never met stopped to help me, asking nothing in return except my smile. That moment of kindness changed the course of my entire life. It gave me everything I see before me now, this beautiful family, this legacy of love. She paused, looking at all the faces watching her. I want you all to remember something. Kindness matters. How you treat people matters. Lucas could have walked past me that day. Most people did. But he stopped, he helped, and he changed my world. You all carry his legacy and you carry mine. Carry it with pride and with purpose. Be the person who stops to help. Be the person who shows kindness without expecting anything in return. That is how we honor those who came before us and create a better world for those who come after. There was not a dry eye in the crowd. Daniel stepped forward and embraced his mother, and then the entire family surrounded her in a mass of love and support. It was a moment of perfect connection, past and present and future all coming together in one place. Nadie lived for 3 more years, staying active and engaged until the very end. She died in the spring of 1929, 2 months shy of her 86th birthday, surrounded by her children and many of her grandchildren. Her last words were about Lucas, telling Daniel that she could see him waiting for her, smiling that smile she had always loved. They buried her next to Lucas on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a pair of oak trees they had planted together decades earlier. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and the dates of their lives, but also bearing a special inscription that Daniel had chosen. She owed him nothing but her smile. He gave her everything in return. The ranch continued to thrive under the care of subsequent generations. Daniel ran it until his own retirement, then passed it to his son. Rose's descendants contributed to the business side, while Thomas's children and grandchildren provided veterinary care to the area. The legacy of Lucas and Nadie lived on not just in the land and buildings, but in the values they had instilled, the strength they had demonstrated, the love they had shared. Decades later, when historians came to research the settlement and development of the California mining regions, they would find Nadie's written stories and be amazed by the tale of the Apache woman and the cowboy who had changed each other's lives with simple kindness. The story was told and retold, becoming part of the region's folklore, an example of how love could triumph over prejudice and hardship. But for the family, it was never just a story or a legend. It was the foundation of everything they were, the proof that one moment of compassion could ripple forward through generations. Every time they gathered at the ranch, every time they faced a difficult decision, they would ask themselves what Lucas would have done, what Nadie would have advised. The ranch still stands today, now run by the 5th generation of Pierce descendants. The original house has been preserved, and visitors can see where Lucas and Nadie lived, where they raised their family, where they built their remarkable life together. The porch where they sat so many evenings still overlooks the valley, and on quiet nights, some say you can almost feel their presence, still together, still watching over the legacy they created. In the end, what began with an act of simple kindness, with a cowboy telling a desperate woman that she owed him nothing but her smile, became a story of enduring love, family, and the transformative power of compassion. It proved that the smallest gestures can have the largest impacts, that love can bridge any divide, and that a life built on respect, kindness, and mutual support can create a legacy that lasts for generations. Nadie had entered Downieville with nothing, offering herself as payment because she believed she had no other value. But Lucas had seen what she could not see in that moment, that she had everything to offer, everything to give, everything to become. He had asked only for her smile because he understood that joy and hope were what she most needed to rediscover. And in the 50 years they spent together, they both smiled more than either had ever imagined possible, building a love story that would inspire their descendants for generations to come.